Chloe stared at the wedding invitation with a mixture of dread and excitement. It wasn't the wedding itself that filled her with anxiety, but rather the prospect of facing her ex-boyfriend, Richard, and his new girlfriend, who also happened to be Chloe's former best friend. The last thing she wanted was to be the single, pitied cousin at her own family gathering. But who could she possibly bring as a date on such short notice? Little did she know, the solution was sitting just a few desks away, in the form of her kind, unassuming colleague, Jack. Chapter 1. The crisp autumn air swirled around Chloe's ankles as she stared at the gleaming invitation in her hand. Her cousin, Emily, was getting engaged, and the entire family was invited to celebrate. Excitement bubbled in her chest, but it was quickly overshadowed by a pang of dread. Attending the party alone was unthinkable, especially with the possibility of running into her ex-boyfriend, Richard, and his new girlfriend, Jada, who was also Chloe's best friend. The betrayal had been a double-edged sword, leaving Chloe heartbroken and ostracized within their social circle. She had spent the past year rebuilding her life, piece by shattered piece, and the thought of facing them again threatened to undo all her progress. As Chloe sat at her desk, lost in thought, her coworker, Jack, approached her. His kind eyes and gentle smile were a welcome sight, and she found herself confiding in him about her dilemma. Jack listened patiently, his expression a mixture of concern and understanding. "Why don't I pretend to be your boyfriend at the party?" he offered, his voice laced with sincerity. Chloe's eyes widened in surprise. "But why?" "Because I care about you, Chloe," Jack said sincerely, "and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable or alone at the party." Chloe was touched by his offer. She knew he was just trying to help, but she wasn't sure if she could go through with it. Chapter 2. "Oh, hey, Chloe," Richard said, his voice dripping with charm, looking beautiful as always. Chloe forced a smile. "Hey, Richard, thanks." "So, what brings you to the library today?" Richard asked, leaning against the bookshelf beside her. "Just doing some research for a paper," Chloe replied, avoiding his gaze. "What kind of paper?" Richard inquired, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "It's for my literature class," Chloe said curtly. Richard chuckled. "Ah, literature, my favorite subject." Chloe rolled her eyes. "Really?" "Absolutely," Richard said, his voice sincere. "I love getting lost in a good book, exploring different worlds and characters." Chloe was surprised by his genuine enthusiasm. She had never seen this side of him before. "What are you reading right now?" she asked, curious. "I'm just finishing up The Great Gatsby," Richard replied. "It's a classic, but I've never read it before." "I love that book," Chloe said, her eyes lighting up. "It's one of my favorites." They started talking about the book, their conversation flowing easily. Chloe was surprised at how much they had in common. They both loved classic literature. They both had a passion for writing, and they both had a quirky sense of humor. As the hours passed, Chloe found herself forgetting about her research paper and getting lost in conversation with Richard. She felt a connection with him that she hadn't felt with anyone before. "I should probably get going," Chloe said finally, looking at her watch. "Me too," Richard agreed, reluctantly, "but I'd love to do this again sometime." "I'd like that," Chloe said, her heart pounding in her chest. They exchanged numbers, and Chloe walked out of the library, feeling lighter than air. She knew that she had just met someone special. They began spending more and more time together, studying together in the library, grabbing coffee between classes, and attending campus events. They talked about everything and nothing, from their dreams and aspirations to their hopes and fears. Chloe felt a connection with Richard that she had never felt with anyone before. One sunny afternoon, they were sprawled out on the library lawn, reading their textbooks. Chloe glanced up from her book and saw Richard staring at her with a dreamy expression. "What?" she asked, a smile playing on her lips. "You're beautiful," he said simply. Chloe's heart skipped a beat. "Thank you," she whispered, her cheeks flushing. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Richard spoke again. I really enjoy spending time with you, Chloe, he said. I feel like I can talk to you about anything. I feel the same way, Chloe replied, her voice sincere. They continued talking until the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the campus. As they walked back to their dorms, Chloe realized that she had a crush on Richard. The next day, Richard invited Chloe to have coffee with him. They sat at a small table in a cozy cafe, talking for hours. Chloe learned that Richard was a passionate writer who dreamed of publishing his novel one day. He also shared his love for classic literature, his favorite author being F. Scott Fitzgerald. Chloe was captivated by Richard's intelligence, wit, and passion. She found herself laughing at his jokes, sharing her own dreams, and feeling a connection with him that she had never felt with anyone before. As they were leaving the cafe, Richard took Chloe's hand in his. I had a really great time with you today, Chloe, he said, his eyes sparkling. Me too, Chloe replied, her heart pounding in her chest. Richard leaned in and kissed her gently. The kiss was soft and sweet, and it sent shivers down Chloe's spine. I think I'm falling for you, Chloe, Richard whispered. Chloe smiled, her heart overflowing with happiness. I think I'm falling for you too, Richard, she replied. From that day on, Chloe and Richard were inseparable. They spent all their free time together, going on dates, exploring the city, and simply enjoying each other's company. They fell deeper in love with each day, and they both knew that they had found something exceptional. Chapter 3. Chloe had initially dismissed her concerns as unfounded jealousy, but as she observed Richard and Jada's interactions, a nagging suspicion began to grow in her mind. Jada was undeniably beautiful, with a confident and outgoing personality that seemed to draw Richard in like a moth to a flame. They would often laugh together, share inside jokes, and engage in deep conversations that seemed to exclude Chloe. One evening, Chloe was studying in the library when she saw Richard and Jada sitting at a table, their heads bent close together. They were so engrossed in their conversation that they didn't notice Chloe enter the room. As Chloe approached, she heard Jada say something that made Richard laugh, a sound that sent a pang of jealousy through her heart. Chloe cleared her throat to announce her presence, and Richard and Jada looked up, startled. Jada's smile faltered slightly, and Chloe noticed a flicker of guilt in her eyes. Hey, Chloe, Richard said, his voice strained. What are you doing here? Just studying, Chloe replied, her voice tight. I didn't mean to interrupt. No, it's fine, Jada said quickly. We were just finishing up our conversation. Chloe sat down at the table, feeling like an unwelcome intruder. She tried to focus on her studies, but her mind kept wandering back to Richard and Jada. She couldn't help but wonder what they had been talking about and why Jada had looked so guilty. Later that night, Chloe lay in bed, unable to sleep. She replayed the scene in the library over and over in her mind, her heart filled with a mixture of sadness, anger, and confusion. She didn't know what to believe anymore. Was Richard really falling for Jada, or was she just being paranoid? The following days were filled with torment for Chloe. She watched Richard and Jada interact, their bond seemingly growing stronger with each passing moment. She felt like she was losing her best friend and her boyfriend all at once. One day, Chloe decided she couldn't take it anymore. She confronted Richard about her suspicions. Why are you so insecure, Chloe? Richard asked, his voice laced with irritation. Jada is your best friend, and she's just a friend to me. Chloe's heart sank. She had hoped that Richard would understand her concerns, but instead, he was dismissing them as unfounded jealousy. It's not that I don't trust you, Richard, Chloe said, her voice trembling. It's just that things have changed between you and Jada lately. What do you mean? Richard asked, his eyes defensive. You're spending more and more time together, Chloe said. You're talking more, laughing more. It's like you're in your own little world when you're with her. Richard sighed. Chloe, you're imagining things. Am I? Chloe challenged. I saw the way you were looking at her the other day. It was like you were looking at someone you were in love with. Richard's face flushed. "That's not true," he stammered. "I love you, Chloe. You're the only one for me." But Chloe wasn't convinced. She could see the truth in his eyes, the way they lingered on Jada's face a little too long, the way his smile seemed a little brighter when she was around. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Richard," Chloe said, her voice breaking. I don't feel like I know you anymore." Richard reached out to touch her, but she pulled away. "Please, Chloe," he pleaded. "Just trust me." Chapter 4. Chloe let herself into the apartment, her heart pounding with anticipation. She had been looking forward to spending the evening with Richard, but as she stepped inside, her heart sank. The living room was bathed in the soft glow of the lamp, and the air was thick with the scent of perfume. Chloe's eyes fell on the couch, where Richard and Jada were locked in a passionate embrace. Her world seemed to stop. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Richard, her boyfriend, her best friend, was kissing her best friend. Her heart shattered into a million pieces. A wave of anger and betrayal washed over her. She couldn't believe that Richard would do this to her, especially with Jada. She had always trusted them both, and they had both betrayed her. Chloe stood there, frozen, unable to move or speak. She felt a cold numbness spreading through her body. She couldn't believe that this was happening to her. After a few moments, Chloe found her voice. "What the hell is going on here?" she asked, her voice trembling. Richard and Jada pulled apart, their faces flushed with embarrassment. "Chloe, I can explain," Richard stammered. "Explain what?" Chloe asked, her voice rising. "Explain how you could betray me like this. How could you do this with my best friend?" Jada stepped forward, her eyes filled with guilt. "Chloe, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." Chloe couldn't believe what she was hearing. Jada, her best friend, was apologizing for betraying her with her boyfriend. "You're sorry?" Chloe asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're sorry you got caught?" Jada didn't respond. She knew she couldn't justify her actions. Chloe turned to Richard, her eyes filled with tears. "I can't believe you did this to me," she whispered. "I thought you loved me. How could you do this to me, especially with Jada?" Richard, his face etched with guilt, hesitated. "I don't know, Chloe. Things just happened." Chloe's heart ached. "Things just happened? That's it? You couldn't at least be honest with me?" Richard sighed, avoiding her gaze. "I know it hurts, Chloe, and I'm truly sorry, but feelings change, and sometimes people move on." Chloe's anger flared. "So you're telling me that our years of friendship and love meant nothing? You just threw it all away for a fling with Jada?" Richard looked down at the floor, unable to meet her gaze. He knew that he had hurt Chloe deeply, and he didn't know how to make it right. "Jada, how could you?" Chloe asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We were best friends." Chloe turned and walked out of the apartment, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't bear to stay there any longer. Jada followed Chloe out of the apartment, her voice trailing behind her. "Chloe, wait! Please let me explain." But Chloe didn't stop. She walked away, her heart heavy with betrayal and pain. She couldn't bear to hear Jada's excuses. The next few days were a blur of tears and anger. Chloe couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything. She felt like her world had been shattered, and she didn't know how to pick up the pieces. Chapter 5. Chloe sat on her couch, the invitation to her cousin's wedding in her hand. A whirlwind of excitement swirled within her. She was thrilled for her cousin, but the thought of attending the wedding alone filled her with anxiety. Her family had always adored Richard. They saw him as the perfect match for Chloe, and they were devastated when their relationship ended. Now, with Richard likely to attend the wedding, Chloe knew she couldn't risk going alone. She needed a date, someone to accompany her and shield her from the inevitable awkwardness and pitying glances. She thought about her friends, but none of them seemed quite right for the role. She needed someone who could hold their own in a social setting, someone who would make a good impression on her family. As she pondered her options, a familiar face popped into her mind. Jack. He was kind, intelligent, and had a great sense of humor. He was also a good listener and always knew how to make her feel better. Perhaps he would be willing to help her out. The next day at work, Chloe summoned up her courage and walked up to Jack. She hadn't felt ready to date anyone since her breakup. Her demanding job as a lawyer took up most of her time and energy. However, her cousin's wedding was coming up, and she couldn't miss it. She needed a date, someone to accompany her and shield her from the inevitable awkwardness and pitying glances. Jack, she began, her voice barely a whisper. I need your help. Jack, surprised by her request, raised an eyebrow. What's up, Chloe? Chloe hesitated, then plunged in. I'm going to my cousin's wedding next month. I know it's a bit of a long shot, but I was wondering if you'd be willing to go as my date. Jack was taken aback. He hadn't expected this, had always admired Chloe from afar, but he hadn't realized she felt the same way. Sure, Chloe, he said, a smile spreading across his face. I'd be happy to go with you. But Jack, Chloe added, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension, I want to be clear. This is just a pretense. I don't want to lead you on or give you false hope. It's just for the wedding, and after that, we can go back to our normal lives. Jack understood. He knew that Chloe was still healing from her past relationship, and he didn't want to push her. I understand, he said, nodding. I'm just here to support you, Chloe. No strings attached. Chloe smiled gratefully. Thank you, Jack. You're a lifesaver. Chloe was relieved. She knew Jack was the perfect person for the job. He was intelligent, funny, and easy to talk to, and most importantly, he was kind and understanding. Thanks, Jack, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. I really appreciate this. No problem, Jack replied. I'm glad I can help. As they talked, Chloe filled Jack in on the details of the wedding, from the dress code to the seating arrangements. She also told him about her ex-boyfriend, Richard, and how he would be attending the wedding with his new girlfriend, Jada. Jack listened patiently, his expression thoughtful. He knew that this would be a difficult situation for Chloe, but he was determined to help her through it. He promised her that he would be there for her, no matter what. With Jack by her side, Chloe felt a sense of peace and security. She knew that she could face anything, no matter how challenging. And so, the plan was set. Chloe and Jack agreed to meet before the party to practice their story. They decided to say they had been dating for a few months and that they were very much in love. After work, they met at a cozy cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. Chloe couldn't help but feel a flutter of nerves as she sat across from Jack. This was all a bit surreal, a carefully crafted illusion. Yet there was a strange comfort in his presence, a familiar warmth that eased her anxieties. So we met at that tech conference last year, Jack began, a playful glint in his eyes. Remember that long debate we had about AI ethics? Chloe chuckled. How could I forget? We argued for hours, and then we realized we had so much in common. They practiced their lines, their voices blending harmoniously. As they delved deeper into their fabricated romance, Chloe couldn't shake the feeling that there was something genuine emerging between them. Perhaps it was the shared intellectual curiosity, the understanding, or simply the comfort of each other's company. Chapter 6. The night of the party arrived, and Chloe and Jack entered the venue together, arms linked. They received curious glances from some guests, but for the most part, people seemed to believe their story. You look stunning, Chloe, Jack whispered, his eyes admiring her. Chloe smiled, her cheeks turning pink. You don't look too bad yourself, Jack. As they navigated the crowded room, they encountered familiar faces. Chloe, who's this handsome fella? Emily exclaimed, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. This is Jack, Chloe introduced, her voice filled with pride. We've been dating for a few months now. Jack flashed a charming smile. It's a pleasure to meet you, Emily. Emily's eyes widened in surprise. Well, you two make a lovely couple. As the night wore on, Chloe and Jack mingled with the guests, their fabricated romance growing more convincing with each passing moment. They danced together, laughed together, and shared stolen glances that hinted at a deeper connection. "You know, I'm starting to think we could actually pull this off," Jack whispered to Chloe as they danced. Chloe laughed. "I know, right? It's kind of fun." As Chloe and Jack were navigating the crowd, a familiar face caught Chloe's eye. Richard, her ex-boyfriend, was standing with his new girlfriend, Jada. A wave of anxiety washed over her, but she quickly composed herself. "Don't worry," Jack whispered, sensing her discomfort. "I've got this." Richard approached them, a smirk playing on his lips. Well, look who's got a new boyfriend." Jack stepped forward, his arm protectively around Chloe's waist. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Richard. I'm Jack." Richard's expression turned from smug to surprised. He hadn't expected Jack to be so confident and assertive. "So, you're the lucky guy, huh?" Richard asked, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Lucky indeed," Jack replied, his voice steady. "Chloe's one of a kind." Chloe couldn't help but smile at Jack's unwavering support. He was handling the situation with grace and poise, and she was grateful for his presence. "Well, I hope you two enjoy the party," Richard said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "But don't forget, some relationships are meant to last." Jack raised an eyebrow, and others aren't. Richard's face turned red with anger, but he couldn't argue back. He knew he had been outplayed. As Richard and Jada walked away, Chloe turned to Jack. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved me." Jack smiled. "Anytime, Chloe." But beneath the surface of their playful banter, a more serious undercurrent was brewing. They were both aware that their relationship was a facade, a carefully constructed illusion. Yet, as they spent more time together, they couldn't help but feel a genuine connection forming. Chapter 7. As the night wore on, Chloe realized that she wasn't just pretending to be in love with Jack. She was actually starting to fall for him. His kindness, his intelligence, and his infectious laugh were qualities that resonated deeply with her. She found herself drawn to his gentle nature and his unwavering support. When Jack looked into her eyes with a genuine smile, Chloe's heart skipped a beat. She felt a spark ignite within her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. She didn't know where this path would lead, but she was excited to embrace the uncertainty. As they danced the night away, Chloe couldn't help but wonder if this was just a fleeting moment or the beginning of something truly special. She hoped that their connection would extend beyond the pretense, that it would blossom into something real and lasting. The next morning, Chloe woke with a smile on her face. The soft morning light filtering through the curtains cast a warm glow on Jack's sleeping form beside her. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt so peaceful and content. "Morning," Jack mumbled, his voice groggy. "Morning," Chloe replied, her voice soft. "Sleep well?" "Yeah, I did," Jack said, stretching. "You?" "Me too," Chloe said. "I had a really good night." There was a moment of silence as they lay in bed, the only sound the ticking of the clock. "I can't believe we actually did it," Jack said, breaking the silence. "We pulled off the perfect fake relationship." Chloe smiled. "Yeah, it was pretty amazing, wasn't it?" "It was more than amazing," Jack said. "It was real." Chloe's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I think I'm falling for you, Chloe," Jack confessed. "I know this is crazy, but I can't deny it anymore." Chloe was stunned. She had never thought that Jack would feel the same way. "I feel the same way, Jack," she admitted. "I think I'm falling for you too." They lay in bed, their fingers intertwined, their hearts filled with love and hope. They knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to face whatever challenges came their way.